Hi everyone, welcome. Well, this is an amazing turnout. I'm not surprised that maybe you set the record, or Caroline set the record for turnout. She was always extremely popular, along with her brother and her twin sister, Alexandra. And her mom. No, it's great to be here, great to see everybody. Thank you, Caroline, for bestowing on me the honor of introducing you, and I was hoping you'd choose me back in 1975, but sometimes you just gotta wait. I'm not gonna go into a lot of background about Caroline. Most of you know her. She's one of the girls from the block. We spent a lot of time together, all of us here at in Cornwall, Cream Hill Lake, having little adventures. She, of course, has gone on to some much bigger adventures. We're extremely proud of her. She is a former San Francisco firefighter, one of the first women in that role. She's always broken ground, and her books are terrific. I've read them all. I am quite what? Every single one. I think every single one. I think every single one. This one is great. I'm about 3/4 of the way through it, and I said to Caroline, I said it's really good, and I was talking to her about some of the passages, and she said, you know, it's really a book for women. I'm surprised you didn't have to read it. I said, it is, it's a book for women. And I truly didn't realize that. That was not me. I mean, there's some passages that I could relate to, especially the counterclockwise study, which I thought was extremely interesting. I won't read from that because she may, but Caroline and I have had adventures. I brought a couple of photos. Here's one of her walking out to an airplane we got into back in the summer of 1983.
I'm scared. He's gonna pilot that plane.
It's in this picture. I think you're in the left seat.
You let me fly?
I think you did, and you got pretty low. Here's Cream Hill Lake.
It's illegal.
And then
I am a pilot now, and I know
there
that.
may have been bottle rockets involved, but I don't remember. It was a long time ago. But I read this book and I thought to myself, I need to do some more adventures. It is truly inspirational. And I started thinking, okay, what am I going to do between now and the library reading? Should I get in my kayak and run Bulls Bridge, which I haven't run in 15 years? But it really does make you think about trying something new, pushing yourself, and finding a new adventure at whatever level you're able to. Anyway, without further ado, Caroline.
Honestly, you know, the reason I am a pilot now, and the reason is because of Henry. He took me flying, and the only other person, and I knew, of course, about Amelia Earhart. She was my role model, so it's Amelia Earhart and Henry LeBon. By the way, he did what I will never do since, which is that he had great prowess as a pilot. He did all these steep turns that I think to impress. And I got so airsick, but I was like zip the lip, didn't show it, and it obviously got the bug because I became a pilot. So thank you all for being here. I can't tell you how honored I am to be in my hometown. This is my last reading, and actually probably the one closest to my heart. I know a lot of you, you've touched me in some big ways, some small, but All of you who did, who I know, thank you, because Cornwall is one of those places you don't get out of your system, like the landscape still speaks to me, and all my memories do. And for those of you who don't know me, thank you for coming. I really appreciate that faith. So Tough Broad, from boogie boarding to wing walking, how outdoor adventure improves our lives as we age, is really my own quest to understand fulfilling aging. Everything okay? Are you okay? It's all good? Is my own quest to understand my own aging journey. I thought I would just quickly, so in the book, I look into the science and the psychology of fulfilling aging. And I go on adventures with women to look into how outdoor adventure fits into the transformation of our minds and our bodies as we age. I thought I'd just start with a very quick reading, but I don't like reading a lot. So it'll be just a couple minutes to give you a sense of the book. So to set it up, it's my first interview and I go to Yosemite National Park and it's the pandemic. And they've changed the rules, you need a reservation, which we do have. And I pull my car up to the toll booth and a very young ranger leans out and she looks at my reservation and she says, your name isn't on the reservation. And so I can't let you bring your car in. And that's where we leave it. I look for a sign that the ranger will relent, but she is young and earnest and rules are rules. For a moment, there's an awkward silence. Do people walk? I ask. And she looks alarmed and tells me it's 9 miles to the valley. Then I remember my one wheel, fully charged to its 15-mile capacity and resting in the trunk. So I say, half joking and half desperate, well, can I get on my one wheel? I can see by her face that she doesn't understand, so I add, it's an electric skateboard. And she blinks rapidly, taking in the staid hatchback with the sensible gas mileage, the gray roots of my hair, the thin veil of cat dander that may be rising from my shirt, and the 1963 birth date on the ID. She repeats, electric skateboard? As if giving me time to tell her I'm not serious. But I just nod and she pulls her head back in the booth and then reappears moments later and says that, okay, sure, an electric skateboard is allowed. Okay, I'll be back, I say, and I watch her go momentarily still, as if already lost in the future of what she will compose on her social media feed. LOL, old lady on skateboard. I don't hold this against her. When I was her age, I was exactly the same, dumping everyone over 50 unceremoniously into a box labeled old, subdividing that further into just a few categories, limited to adjectives like frail, senile, or boring. Not to mention the big one, dying. From my callow know-it-all perspective, everyone over 50 was on the downhill slide to imminent death. So I don't feel resentful, I feel delighted. And even a little bit sorry for my young ranger, who doesn't realize that soon enough she will be where I am. For now, though, she is still certain that the world works in a particular way, and that this is some sort of misunderstanding. She pins the politeness back on her face and waves me around in a U-turn. I park my car a quarter mile down the mountain. I put on my wrist guards and my helmet and my fanny pack, because I may be a skateboarder, but I am still 57 years old and believe in safety first and quick access to chapstick. I remove the one wheel from the trunk, switch it on, and then step back, admiring it. And then I have some paragraphs that are lyrical sentences of whizzing back up the mountain to the rangers on my one wheel, and then I get to them and they're actually kind of terrified of me. I come whipping towards them and they all step back, but there is no mishap, and then there's lots of cool questions about it. And more paragraphs, so I'm gonna skip to the end. As I accept the map that has been proffered and answer a few wide-eyed questions about the one wheel, I can tell that I've upended expectations. Yet the young rangers have also deemed me harmless. I'm a one-time zoological curiosity, a far outlier on an otherwise neatly plotted bell curve. But here's what I haven't told them. The friend whose name is on my reservation, who I am meeting, is also in her 50s, and she would also give them pause, but much, much more pause. She is a base jumper, someone who dons a parachute, then hucks herself from buildings, antenna, spans, and earth. That's what base stands for, BASE. Tomorrow at dawn, it will be Earth, specifically the Earth on the rim of Yosemite's fabled wall, El Capitan. This is, of course, illegal. There is even a Yosemite Park jail for those caught doing it, and two, for those like myself, who serve as accessories to their crimes. But right now, to the earnest milling rangers, I am the antithesis of a future felon. I am an older white woman with a cockamamie hobby, and it is confirmed again that the reservation is needed for the car, not the human, and that I'm free to continue on my skateboard. I am sent off with genuine smiles and small shakes of the head. And then the rangers turn back to their duties, naturally assuming that there will be no more surprises, that I am otherwise just a gal with a bird list and a picnic, meeting a friend for a golf around the valley. If they hear from me again, they are sure it will be because my friend stopped her sedan in the middle of the road and traffic piled up behind us. That's the kind of ridiculous things those old women do when they spot something flying in the wild, the young rangers have been told. They have no inkling that what might be flying in the wild is actually one of those older women. So that just gives you a sense of the book. This book came out of a realization one day when I was on my surfboard in pretty cold winter swell in the Pacific, and I looked around and there was no women my age out there. There were men my age, and there were lots of older men too. And I'm not even a very good surfer, so I knew that it was early conditions, but women could handle it. And the same was when I was on, oh, sorry, I forgot. That's Sean, the base jumper. I just wanted to show you. We went base. She's nothing about her is what you would think a base jumper would be. She's a grandmother. She's a 52. She's African American. Yeah, she's badass, really. And this is my one wheel. For those of you who couldn't quite picture it. This is kind of the question that I started this book with, because I just didn't see women my age out there. And as I was looking at my own future, and after living a life of adventure where I thought I was my best self in the outdoors, I wondered if there was something that I didn't know. What became clear is that the messaging around aging for women is really toxic. I have a lot of science in this book, but I didn't really have to prove this because all women are like this. By the way, this book is really great for men too. The reason I wrote it, because men get a lot out of it. And I love that you access your feminine side to read the first part where I talk about the messaging that women get. Because there's so much that's important here. I didn't want to write a book for men too, because I felt like this was such an important aspect of our aging that I just wasn't seeing women outside while I was seeing men. So you get negative messages. I just didn't know what they were and they weren't back. So, so the messaging is basically that we're frail. We have to worry about our bones. We're on a cognitive decline. We are, many friends my age were talking about how they felt invisible. We're culturally irrelevant. I mean, just a couple of years ago, Indiana Jones was 75 and he was running through the tombs, but we don't get that kind of, and I talk about in the book, James Bond villains, always over 50, trying to blow up the world. And it's not a great use of your older age, but it's still charisma and vitality and enthusiasm. So we don't get those role models. So it became clear that this was part of the reason women weren't outside, because they felt that the uncertainty of the outdoors was too dangerous. And so we were narrowing our lives. And very early on in my writing, I came across this study, and if you remember nothing else from tonight, and this applies to everybody, I hope that you remember this, which is that the way we look at our own aging predicts how well we age. So what the studies show is that if you have a negative view of your own aging, you have a much significantly higher chance of a cardiac event earlier and cognitive decline earlier. And the opposite is true. If you have a positive view of your own aging, you are happier and healthier, and you live 7.5 years longer, which is a long time. They had another study that came out after I handed the book in, where they looked at people. They looked at 14,000 people, and those with a positive view of their own aging had 43% less chance of dying in the next 4 years than people who had a negative view. That's just another, just eye-opening. So this was incredible news and something I felt was vital for me to understand. But then the question is, how do you get that positive mindset in the face of such toxic messaging that women get? And it started to become clear when I interviewed the wave chasers. And they're boogie boarders in San Diego, between the ages of 60 and 80, even in their 90s. And for those of you, everybody know what boogie boarding is? It's like a simple sport. And the reason I really initially wanted to talk to them is because it seemed like something that anybody could pick up at a later age, because it's really a sport for kids. And as a surfer, albeit a bad surfer, I kind of looked down on boogie boarding, I have to say, but I wanted to include it because I figured that it was an access to the outdoors. Then I interviewed one of these women called Lorraine Voigt. She was 62. And she said to me, Caroline, boogie boarding changed my life. And how can a sport that kids do change your life? So I asked her, and she said basically, look at me. Look at the cold Pacific Ocean. Look at the decision-making I have to do every time I get in the water. Look at the teamwork that I have to, that I interact with other people. Look how I'm helping people have fun. Basically, what I realized when I interviewed her was that what boogie boarding and any outdoor adventure asks of you is a direct rebuke to all that messaging that we get. I guarantee you, none of these wave chasers felt frail, on a cognitive decline, and none of them felt boring. So what I saw was that when you upend your own expectations of yourself, and it can be as simple as getting in the water, then suddenly your life opens up. That's how powerful this was. And that's why this book is for women. From now on, I mean, obviously that's a message for men too, but from now on, everything I learned about getting outside is for everybody. So this is Dr. Smith. She's 93 here. I was interested in interviewing her because one thing, I did a lot of research before I interviewed people because COVID hit and I couldn't see people in person. It turned out to be great. What I realized was that there's basically 5 pillars of healthy aging. And they are community, novelty, health, purpose, and finally I added this positive view of your own aging. And so I was interested in how outdoor adventure helped us with our health. And I went to the obvious thing, walking. The most basic thing that we can do, and movement is so important. So Dr. Smith she's a backpacker actually. She wanted to actually go on this long hike up 5 miles of a mountain called Grizzly Peak. And I was immediately intimidated. And I asked her if we could only do like a small walk, which she sort of deigned to do with me. And I wanted this chapter to show how walking was important, that health. What I came away with, in fact, this happened with everybody. I came in with an idea of where that adventure would slot into this fulfilling these 5 pillars, and I came away with a much more expanded view. So it turns out that walking is great and you should do it and you should exercise in the gym, but nature itself is medicinal. in such powerful ways. And they've done a lot of studies on this, and I'll just sort of encapsulate a few. But even like the tree chemicals that are emitted lower our stress hormones, lower our cortisol. Bird song is calms our brain, lowers our blood pressure. They think it's because on some primal level, when birds are singing, there's no predators about, so we can rest. Whereas really in an urban environment, we're always in sort of a low key fight or flight mode, which is not good for our brain. It puts us in, makes our brain need to constantly filter out noise, which means it's working in ways that is busy work. In fact, they've shown that those people who go out on a short walk in green space come back and test better on cognitive and memory tests. The other thing that really took me by surprise is why it's really good to be outside is because the rounded shapes of nature and the fractal elements of nature match really well with our retinal structure, which means that it doesn't take a lot for our brain to process what's going on. And again, when we're in an urban environment, there's so much noise and there's so much work we have to do filtering it out. And they say that like just 15 to 45 minutes in a green space, about 5 hours a week is really, really good for you. Anyway, she ended up liking me at the end, but she did not like me when she first met me. She said, why didn't you want to go on that hike? You look very robust. So the dot scared me. And her first injury came at age 90. So she said, before I got injured, I was very unsympathetic to injuries, but now that I've been injured, I'm much more sympathetic. And I was like, oh my God, you must have been so unsympathetic. So another thing that's really important as we age and that tends to fall away is novelty. So most of us don't learn something new after a certain, and I ask people like, when was the last time you learned something new? And novelty is really important for our brain because it really fires it in ways that keep it working and lay down new neural pathways. So I was interested in talking to someone who had learned something new at an older age, and this is Vijaya Srivastava. And she learned to swim at 68, which is, she was like most of us afraid of drowning, and she was actually the person, she had the least outdoor experience of anyone I've ever met. In that, she had never had any outdoor affinity, and she didn't even walk. She said she walked sometimes to lunch with her co-op workers, but she grew up in India, so badminton she had played like 3 times. But when her doctor said, look, you need to change some of these numbers, and again, a lot of these women who had not done outdoor adventure said yes to it at an inflection point in their lives. So Lorraine Voigt, the boogie boarder who had never had any affinity to an outdoor activity, said yes to boogie boarding because it was a pandemic, and she was like, whatever, they look like they're having fun. And Vijaya was told by her doctor, and so she started her swimming journey by enlisting a friend. So there's this, I think we know, there's that whole saying of old dogs can't learn new tricks, and I hear it all from a lot of my friends, like, I'm too old to learn that, I'm too old. But in fact, you need to embrace something new because it is super important for brain health, which is one of the things that we're worried about as we age. It turns out, and I think most of us know this, but society doesn't. So we sort of know that there is such a thing called brain plasticity, and that happens until you die. Like your brain keeps making brain cells. Even an injured brain will try to lay down new neural pathways. So your brain is constantly trying to work, and you really want to help it. So Vijaya, I asked her, when I met her, she had already learned to swim. And when I asked her, did being older, was that a hindrance to learning something this difficult at this later age? And she said, no, it actually helped because, first of all, she didn't care about the bulges in her bathing suit. She knew she wasn't going to be great at it, and that was okay. And she said, she called it the Cinderella moment. She wasn't going to have another chance to do this. And so that helped her, that urgency being older really helped her. So the other thing about the brain, which is something that we worry about as we age, is our memory. Now, it turns out that memory and navigation are in the same part of your brain. So if people are injured and injure their hippocampus, and actually you can, if I say something wrong here, because I'm just kind of a journalist.
Call you out.
Okay. If you injure yourself in the hippocampus, you also start losing your ability to make memories. They've done a lot of research on navigation and memory. And the reason why this is so important is because we don't navigate anymore. Most of us use GPS. Now, I tried to find studies that showed like, what is GPS doing to our brain if it's so important for memory? And I didn't find a lot at the time, but I feel like there's gonna be an onslaught. So for those of you who might not know, so I wanted to find someone who was outside with a map and compass. And this is Penny DeMoss, and she does orienteering, which is basically trail running with a map and compass. So she took me trail running so that basically I could explicate during this chapter about the intersection between navigation and memory. It's not a very popular sport here, it's very popular in Scandinavia, but it's really cool. Luckily, she had broken her foot, so she didn't run. So we walked this course, but it was full on through Thistle. She was 72. And you basically, what it is a race where you use a map to pinpoint where you are, and then you find these checkpoints along the way. So to just go a little bit deeper in the navigation part, so London taxi drivers have to take this test, and they have to learn 25,000 streets and thousands of landmarks. And they've shown through MRIs that taxi drivers' brains get bigger hippocampus, get bigger the longer they work, which shows that you can grow your hippocampus, which is really good news for us if we want to keep our memory situation healthy. There's also, I don't know if you know about memory champions who have to memorize long lines of numbers. So the current memory champion for pi is pi to the 70th thousandth place. It took him 9 hours to recite it. And the way you can hold big strings of information in your mind, and they've known this since like the Greek memory champion days, is this method called the method of loci, which is where you take, let's say, a familiar place, let's say your home, the house you grew up in, and you put it in your mind, and then you assign, if you're trying to win a pie championship, you assign numbers to certain places in your house. And then to remember the numbers, you walk through your house. You're like, here's the window, 4. I'm gonna turn right to go to up the stairs on the finial, 7. And then you walk up top of the stairs, 9. And when I first heard that, I was like, hold on. You're trying to remember long strings of number, and you're trying to remember your old house, and then you're trying to remember where the numbers are in your house. That sounds like a lot. It sounds like I just want to memorize the numbers. But in fact, that's the way people can hold big strings of information, because navigation and memory are so intertwined. So what I suggest or want people is to try to orient yourself at least. Sebastian knows this, I'm terrible at this. I'm constantly lost here in Cornwall. I know where I am based on my next landmark, but I don't know where I am in the big picture. Where's north, where's south? And I think that can really help our brain. And soon they're gonna definitely have more information about this. But if you're in any way worried, start using a map. So this is Louise Wholey. I was interested because she's 80. She took me scuba diving in Monterey Bay. And I was interested in her because of the purpose that we need in our lives and tends to fall away. And she dives for citizen science. She does a lot of, she counts stipe on kelp, and she counts fish. And she was interesting because she made me wonder, because she had been an outdoors person all her life. And I actually interviewed her first. She was one of my initial ones after Sean. And she made me wonder because she was so, every time I asked her a question about like, what do you think about aging? What did you think about aging? She would just look at me blankly like, aging, it's not that she wanted to be younger, and none of the women want to be younger. It's just it was not relevant to her, what she thought she could and could not do. So I was curious, because was she somebody who was born with a sort of confidence that then made her go outside, or did going outside offer her this positive perspective on aging? So when I first interviewed her, that was the question I had in my mind. But as I began to interview other women, especially the ones who started late in life, I realized, oh no, when you upend your own expectations by simply going outside, then that's really powerful. So I was interested in competitive sports. How do they like fire our brain? So I did interview a triathlete, but Miss Kitty, that's her racing moniker. Kitty Weston Nauer is the oldest BMX bike racer, female bike racer on the circuit today. She's 74 here. She's older now. And I went in thinking, oh, I want to talk about how competition really like lights up our brain. And I'm sure it does. It's good for kids. It must be good for us. But like everything, I went in thinking that. And what she did is she taught me how to BMX bike race. And then I entered a competition. And that's Lucy Cook. Lucy Tough Cookie Cook. That's what it is. So I was like, I read about this in the book, but I was like, what's my racing moniker? So I didn't ask them because I was too embarrassed. But in my mind, I was Caroline the Writer Hall. I think some of you know that I used to be a luger. So I was a luger back in my 20s. So luging is that sled sport. And I was terrible at it, but there were so few people luging that I was actually top 11 in the country. There were only 12 people in that race. So what happened is I would continually crash at this corner, and it got so bad that people would be like, Caroline's about to come down the track. Let's all gather at that corner to see how bad the crash is going to be. The thing was, you only have to cross the finish line holding onto your sled. You didn't have to be on your sled. But anyway, this kind of brought up a little bit of PTSD for me, because back then my nickname was Crash. So I don't want that to be again, so I went for something more. What I came away with when I was with Miss Kitty is that what was really important here was not the competition, it was the community. So what Miss Kitty was doing when she was BMX bike racing was that she was part of what scientists call a cultural apparatus. So they've done studies on happy people. Happy people hang out with other people. And they've done studies on people who have religion, churches, synagogues, temples, churches. And they find that they're happier than those of us who don't. But what they've sort of parsed out is that it's not really because of God, no knock on God, but it's really because of this cultural apparatus that they have around the church that gives their life meaning and community. So it's not just socializing that you want to have a sense of belonging. And I know people in Cornwall are really good at this. So, and something like BMX biking, in fact, every single sport that I looked at, activity I looked at, offered almost all the 5 pillars of healthy aging. That's why when people say to me, well, you know, I go to the gym for health. Good, but where's the community there? Where's the, maybe there's novelty, but where's the purpose? You know, people say I joined a book club, great, novelty and community, but where's the health? So all I'm saying is what I began to really understand is how picking an outdoor activity covers everything in one fell swoop. The amazing thing about BMX is that it's really intergenerational. Like all the kids, we actually all raced together because there were no other women. So we were, the 12-year-old creamed us, of course. But I was 57 or 58 and she was 74. We all had to race together because there was nobody else. So one thing I was interested in is adaptability, because as we age, we have to adapt. But it should not be a reason not to get outside, but how do we adapt? So this is Virginia Rose. She's a birder, and she's been in a wheelchair since she was 14. And as she told me, you know, Caroline, we're all temporarily able-bodied. And if you're lucky, you'll get to where I am now at someday. And so she started this organization called Birdability, where she brings people with disabilities outside. She believes in the power of birding. And honestly, I did not believe in the power of birding. Because I'm embarrassed. I get schooled so often. When I say this book is a quest, I really mean it. I knew none of the science. I had an inkling that outdoor adventure was something that I wanted to keep in my life and I needed to prove it. But I knew pretty much nothing. And I came in with this idea of adventure as being pretty specific. Like it had to be high octane, you know, and have a lot of adrenaline and push your comfort zone in a real big way. And so when I went to bird, I really only wanted to put it in the book because it didn't really count as an adventure, but it was adaptability and it would get people outside. And I was already pretty convinced that getting outside was important because I had done the research on how the outdoors were so medicinal. But when I went birding with Virginia Rose, it became clear to me that birding had all the hallmarks of adventure, it had all the rhythms of adventure. It was a quest. There was the anticipation when you heard a bird, but you didn't see it, and you saw it, exhilaration. There was purpose. There was physical vitality, like all adventure should have. In this case, we were on a bird-a-thon, which surprised me. We did 6 miles. They wheeled, I walked 6 miles, and we logged 52 species for citizen science. This really, going bird watching changed my mind about what an adventure is. Turns out an adventure is anything that taps your own exploratory nature, that exhilarates you, that offers you vitality, pushes some of your comfort zone, but doesn't have to be skydiving. It does not have to be skydiving. This is my mom. So my mom did skydiving at 52. And I was super interested in what a one-time adventure offers us as we age, because skydiving changed my mom. 2 minutes in the air. She had thought of herself as not a brave person, and she wasn't an outdoors person at all. And she went skydiving because my twin sister was skydiving at the time, and my mom decided to go along. And she can't really tell you why, but again, it was an inflection point. She was going through a rougher time in her life, and she was visiting my sister, and she thought, why not? And she went, and this is her after she landed. She's actually smiling. And by the way, they said, do you want to do it tandem? She said, no, I want to do it alone. Now we're going to jump just you.
Yeah.
And she afterwards, she was different. And I wasn't even that young, but I was still callow. And I didn't really give her the credit that was due, but I saw the change in her. And I asked her when I interviewed her for the book, what was it about skydiving? And she said, well, I didn't think of myself as a brave person still, but I had done a brave thing. And what she had done is, like I was seeing, she had upended expectations of herself. And what that does is it just shows you that there's more than you think about your life. And by the way, I'm embarrassed about this. So she put on the sticker, the Paris skydiving sticker on the bumper of her car, and teased her about it. Because she's like, no, I'm not showing off. It just makes it easier for me to find my car in the parking. Now I'm super psyched. I'm like, put that sticker on. So this was a trigger for me. Like, what is it that a one-time adventure can show us? So I found Cynthia.
Whoa.
So that is me, by the way, on the book cover. But Cynthia is 71 years old. She had just recovered from cancer. And she was somebody who had a big outdoors life. But as she got older and she got weaker because of the cancer and the chemo, a lot of her outdoors activities fell away, but she would still go on the internet and type in something fun to do here. And something fun to do here brought up wing walking. So wing walking is this thing that we don't do anymore, really. It's when you, well, you walk on a wing. It's from the barnstorming days, where they used to do tricks at low altitude, and they go from town to town in the 1920s. And this is the way they'd earn money, and those wing walkers would go from like one moving plane to another, a moving car to a moving plane, yeah. So I was interested in interviewing Cynthia Hicks, and by the way, I saw her video of this, and I saw that she was yelling something while she was, everybody does the Rocky pose, so I don't know why. I was like, I'm not doing the Rocky pose when I do this, and I did the Rocky. And she was yelling something in the video, and I asked her what it was, and she said, "Thank you, God, for keeping my cancer away. Thank you, God, for letting me be here today." On the wing while she was, so what she told me was, "Caroline, you wouldn't believe the courage you feel when you first climb up on that wing." And I thought, oh no, now I have to go do this because I need to write about courage. And I was not happy about it at all, because I'm a pilot and I don't get out of perfectly good cockpits while the plane is flying, which is what you do. And all morning we had this, our lessons of learning how to do this. And I asked them, but it's gonna be at 3,000 feet, isn't that different? And they're like, no, muscle memory will take over. So it turns out it's true, that so I got in the plane, and when the time came, I clambered up on the wing, and I wasn't very good at it. I had to go back and forth a little, and then I sort of, you don't walk. Okay, let's get this clear. You like slither to that king post. You tie yourself in, and then the pilot begins to do barrel rolls, hoops, and hammerheads. And I went from being like the surliest wing walker, I was not happy this whole morning. Oh, here's my crew. We're all, they're so psyched, they're like, we're adrenaline junkies. And I was like, I'm an adrenaline junkie. Yeah, frankly. I had been thinking that I wasn't, because in the past couple of years, I wasn't actually psyched about the kind of high adrenaline. I still did outdoor things, but I noticed that I didn't really want that high adrenaline. So after I landed as experience, I was very curious, because it felt like adrenaline, yes, but there was something else that was going on when I went from surly to ecstatic. And that was awe. I had experienced awe. Now, they've done a lot of research on awe recently, but when I was doing awe, I had no idea that this in fact was something that I actually got out of my adventures more than adrenaline. So awe is that feeling of wonder and a little bit of fear, maybe a little dread, in the presence of something bigger than you. It's very, people with religious experiences are very well versed in awe. It turns out awe is really good for us. It lowers our inflammation markers, so on a biological level. But also people who feel awe, self-report, lower levels of depression, lower levels of anxiety, and higher levels of compassion, and a feeling of interconnectedness with the world. All things that we need all the time, but definitely as we age. So I realized that's what I had been feeling up there, and that's what I was feeling as I got older when I went outside. I wasn't looking for adrenaline anymore. Turns out you do not have to wing walk to get off. Luckily, you can actually just walk. So they did a study in San Francisco, actually, the Memory Care Institute did, and they got people between the ages of 60 and 80 to go on daily walks. And they asked them to look at everything with fresh, childlike eyes. And then they had a control group who just walked like the rest of us walk, which we worry about our day, we look at our phone. And they found that what they called they were trying to cultivate awe. So you like, instead of what I did, was like went on a wing and I got thrown into awe. This was you actually get in the present and you access your own awe. And the awe walkers, after 8 weeks, had markedly lower inflammation markers again, self-reported much lower rates of anxiety and depression, and higher rates of compassion again. And oh, the other thing, this is really cool. What they asked, almost as an afterthought, they said, could you guys also take selfies during your walk? And they looked at the selfies of the all walkers. And initially, the selfie looks like a selfie we all take, where our face is in the middle. And as the walks progressed, the person's face got smaller and the background got bigger. So that's a metaphor for awe. It's also what awe does for us. It makes it, they call it the small self perspective. It's a healthy understanding of our own place in the world. And it allows for interconnectedness. It turns out we live in a world of anti-awe devices, like our phone. Like it narrows our vision and it makes us feel powerful and in control. None of that is good for us. And so I recommend awe. Turns out everybody that I was interacting with was doing their activity with awe. The birders, oh my God, I never met people who were more awestruck by a tiny brown bird. It's cool that they'd seen a lot of times before. Also my hiker, she had to stop at everything and tell me about how beautiful it was. We were going on an awe walk. But I didn't know because I didn't do my awe research until much later in the book. It was really cool to look back, and it looks, by the way, in the book, I act like I know, so I referenced the all walk, like, oh yeah, but I did not know at the time. Okay, there. I wanted to end on my mom, because when she was 62, she moved to a new town, and she knew nobody. And she was not an outdoors person. But she knew how to bicycle. But she actually didn't really know that well, I will say, because she would keep the bike in the same gear. She didn't realize, and you know why? It's because the person that sold her the bike 15 years before had just seen this middle-aged lady and it basically said, just keep it in the middle gear. And didn't realize that she lived in but my mom did not know this, and so she bicycled in the middle gear for years. So she wasn't a serious bicycler, obviously. But she went to Ashland, Oregon, and she thought, well, I'll pick up bicycling in order to just meet some people. She didn't think it would be anything more than that. And it turned out to be transformative. And the reason is because by merely biking, she gained physical vitality. She began to plan rides, so she brought purpose into her life. She had a community. Now, my mom's not that social, I think most of you know. She professes not to be social. And she loved biking, because she said, you know, if you didn't really want to talk, she's English. I'm not gonna do her accent. If you didn't really want to talk to someone, you just bike away. And so it was really easy, it was a kind of etiquette, it was a kind of community that she could, it was a medium through which she could belong without having the social skills necessary for so many things. And we noticed a big change in her. But when I interviewed my mom for this book, because what I realized is that I, in fact, had never really dreaded my aging process. I actually was psyched about my aging process. And I realized that it was because of my own mom. She had blossomed at 40 and then at 50. And then at 60, when she picked up bicycling and started this whole new life with this whole new attitude. And she showed me the power of upending what you think you can and cannot do. And that life is really, as we age, it's actually a perfect time to access our exhilaration and our exploration. And by the way, I'm just gonna end on one thing, which is that my mom told me, you know, that the 60s were her favorite decade. And so did almost basically every woman I asked who was older than me told me the 60s were their favorite decade. Which, first of all, I'm 60 now, so that rocks. And I was about to turn 60 when I did this book. But what it showed me is like, everything we're told, we're supposed to be our youth that we miss, that is gilded. But in fact, of all these women that I interacted with, they were taking full advantage of these later years. So, thank you so much. questions, if you have any in the audience, yes, Phyllis.
When you're wing walking, do you hold on to anything, you're just literally standing there?
I know, it's ridiculous, don't do it, for sure. But here's the thing, we had actually a lanyard, a rope attached to us, which was clearly in the event of us falling, that it would stop us. But first of all, we never asked, what do we do if we fall and we're dangling under the plane? And they never told us. And I'm a pilot, so I knew, like, how are you gonna land the plane? They've never had anybody fall, and it's also just a walk. It, like many outdoor adventures, it's simply psychological. We think we can't do it. We have, but if you actually parsed out what you were doing, you were simply getting up. Okay, yes, the wind was 60 miles per hour, but there was things to hold on to the whole way, and it was just kind of a walk. By the way, I find that one of the things that women especially have come up to me, actually women only have come up to me and said, but I'm afraid of going outside. And what I say to that is, I understand, because we as women have been, and I'm very interested in this, we have been taught to be afraid, because we teach our girls to be afraid, and we teach our boys to be brave. And the reason we do that is because we think it'll protect our girls. We think that if we make them afraid of the dark out, afraid of the stranger, that we protect them. But in fact, if you don't teach them to be brave, and you don't teach them decision-making skills, you don't teach them confidence, you offload their agency to someone else, and that's the danger. But nevertheless, we school our girls to be afraid, and they've done a lot of studies on this, and I've written about it. And we teach our boys to be brave, and I'm not saying bravery is always good, because there is toxic bravery. So it doesn't surprise me that women come up and say that I'm afraid of the outdoors. What I want to just urge is to say, yes, I hear that, and that's legitimate, but consider fear just a side effect of the most incredible pharmaceutical that you can have, that will improve your life in ways that no pill will. And yet we take pills knowing that there's going to be this vast array of negative side effects that we seem to be fine about, and no one really complains about, and no one really, and they take it because they know it'll make them better. So that's what I ask, just look at fear as a side effect, and it's completely manageable. Anybody else?
One more.
Okay.
I like the idea of all these Cornwall people walking around awestruck by everything.
There's a lot of people that don't have to, but I don't think people knew the word to put to it, and then that you could cultivate it so that you could even get more out of it.
Yeah.
I think we're periodically awestruck by just how beautiful it is here, but now you can actually actively do it in the smallest of ways. I also urge, like, that when people think of adventure, make sure that it's your adventure, that you do whatever. Again, it's about the attributes of an adventure. It's not the thing itself. One of the people that I talked to was a birder who was 35 years old, and he had MS since he was very young, and he shut himself in his house because he was in a wheelchair, but he became interested in birds. And so slowly, very slowly, he went from watching birds in his kitchen to watching them on his patio, and then coming out to his backyard where he watched them around the feeder. And then by the time I met him, he was doing this 6-mile birdathon. And I like to think of that as a really good step-by-step way to get out into what is such a powerful elixir. So I think we'll just end it on that. And I really appreciate all of you coming, and I hope do you guys remember what I said you have to take away from this? So I'm gonna say it one more time. The way we look at our own aging predicts how well we age. So choose, deeply embody an exploratory and exhilarated view of your aging process. All right, thank you.